You being a scientist, have you noticed a sort of like a resistance from the scientific community when it comes to these studies, with, race, IQ, all of these, connecting these two?
Oh, absolutely. The academia is completely cocked, and there's no hope for them to be able to investigate these questions seriously. Well, I
And if,
recommend going to
Mhm.
see
Sorry,
a cataloging of all these studies on whether there's a link between genes and IQ. There's a post at Why Evolution is True, and it's called How Much Variation in Human Behavior is Due to Variation in Our Genes. And you have one of the studies that is cited with the figure being shown right here. Essentially, the ensemble of all psychological and psychiatric variables considered all have a genetic component based on twin studies that range from influencing 40% of the variance to 80% of the variance for IQ. So IQ is determined by genes at least 80%.
all right.
This is a study that you will find at this blog post, and it's a very serious gathering of everything we know about it. Now, you ask about race and IQ. The thing is, if genes within a race influence IQ, there is great chance that we will find the same or even worse genetic influence across races. Now, we don't have twin studies in between races because for the simple fact that twins tend to be of the same race, and therefore we don't have the ability to answer the cross-racial question of IQ, but we have other tools like transracial adoption studies, which seem to be in line with what we found at the individual level, which is that genes cause changes in IQ, and therefore there is no reason to believe that race is an exception to this. And since different races have different frequencies of genes, the same would be expected for for racial differences in IQ.
All right, and one last question. And I noticed you say you're a biologist. You have a PhD in biology, I believe. You being a scientist, have you noticed a sort of like a resistance from the scientific community when it comes to these studies, with race, IQ, all of these, connecting these two? Have you noticed a sort of a type of resistance or when it comes to the peer reviewers and things like that?
Oh, absolutely. The academia is completely cocked, and there's no hope for them to be able to investigate these questions seriously. The academia has been overtaken by Marxists, and they don't want to engage on this, even on considering this question. So what they do is they try to generate finding that's in line with their Marxist preference. And when reality shocks them when the outcome is not what they desired, they change words, they try to not talk about it. You'll often see in genetics research people trying to avoid the word race, and they will instead divide the human population in clans, and they will use all sorts of technical terms just so that the population cannot understand that ultimately, yes, we find racial differences in IQ, but they don't want to hear about it.
All right, that'll be all for me. Thanks so much, and thanks, Wilson. Appreciate it.
Hey, JF, just a quick question. I just want to know. So, this is not a jab. I genuinely want to know, in the genetics realm, would I be considered like an anomaly since, of my descendancy? I'm just.
Well, what's your descendancy?
Well, I am from Southern Africa, actually. That's where that's where I hail from. If we wanted to take a scope into my genetics.
Well, then you're not an anomaly at all. You are black looking and you come from Africa.
But I'm just saying, like, I own my house. I actually have a degree.
Okay.
I go against everything that, the race realists, not to say are you a race realist?
Well, I'm a race realist if the statement of race realism is that races exist. By this standard, yes, I am one, but I don't know anyone who's not one except extreme communist on YouTube. I think you are a race realist too, right? Do you agree that there is such a thing as the black and the white race?
Slowly but surely, I want to say no, but right now I want to say yes because there's a lot of things attached to it when I say yes. And that's only because when I interact with your group and then they look at me there's a kind of, I don't know, all right, sir, what do you want to do based off of that information? And usually the proposals they come up with aren't really in my favor, if you know what I mean.
Well, I don't know exactly what you mean, but let me phrase the question otherwise.
Okay.
Do you acknowledge that when you hang out with black people and when you hang out with white people, that you observe different ways of interacting, ways of behaving, you expect different things?
Oh, I would say no, because I don't know if you know any of my background or looked into our channel, but it's more so when I'm hanging out with Christians, right, that I actually see a difference between non-Christians. Like, my life before the group I hung out was very rambunctious, kind of, we were just heathens, right? But the
now
group now I
you're
hang out with.
You're
Okay.
putting some other category of humans where you do see differences. But I'm asking, at the bottom level, if you forget about all other categories, you know nothing of a person, and they come to you and they are black or they are white, do you expect certain differences? Do you expect that they are equally likely to be quantum physicists, that they are equally likely to be good chess players against you, that they are equally likely to have a house?
Doesn't this seem like a much weaker statement than the average race realist would genuinely make? Oh, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, you're good. Well, and I don't mean to deflect, but how I would interact with the question is, if you're going, and this is very much anecdote, but if you were hanging out with me in Southern California, I had anywhere Asians, blacks, whites, everything, every color of the rainbow in my group, and we were all doing bad things, honestly. It's only when I got to college.
But that's not my question.
Right.
My question is not is if you've ever seen an
category.
Asian acting bad. Of course you did. My question is, do you have certain expectations of certain differences? For example, your Asian friends. Do you think that their parents were having the same behaviors as your black friends?
No.
No. What was the characteristics of the parents of your Asian friends?
Oh, they were like the super Christian folk, I remember.
But they were also Asian, is his point, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah. My bad. See, we're going into super anecdote, and you asked me about my Asian friends. They were, so yes, they were the disciplined group who were, making sure we did our homework before we went outside. They were making sure that when we did get in trouble, we were actually walking up and apologizing to people. And then if I had to go over to my Mexican friends, when we were getting in trouble, they would just literally the mom would take her sandal off and beat the crap out of us.
My point to you is that race realism is merely the statement that your anecdotal observation there is actually statistically viable. That if you were to generalize it, you would find that you're not entirely wrong. And that, yes, if you expect an Asian parent to be strict, you are more likely to be right than you are to be wrong.
Well,
that's what race realism is.
If I were to grant that to you, would you still disagree with biological determinism?
Well, biological determinism is it's both a straw man and a vicious attack. And the thing is, let's say I would say I am a physical determinist. Do you agree that everything that happens around you is caused by some atoms or some ray of light or some electromagnetic radiation?
Sure, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so are you a biological determinist? Then being the question, is everything that we see around us induced by the laws of biology? And the laws of biology being evolution and its effect on genes. And so biological determinism is just as almost certain as physical determinism, in the sense that everything that we see is caused by physics, and everything that we see is caused by our biology also. So if you take it that way, yes, I'm a biological determinist, but most people are the leftists that are using this term genetic determinism. they have in their head a strict view of genes determining 100% the outcome, when in fact it's not even a statement of biology to say that genes are always determining the same outcome. A gene can be a gambler. You can have gambler genes that say, okay, when I'm here in a body, I'm going to create 50% of people intelligent and 50% of people crazy. And you can have a gene like this. It's not against biology.